This week on Brumme's World.
You know what? I'm looking way too closely at this. We could just
Yes!
move on. This takes
That's
place
what
in
I'm saying.
Casablanca,
What do you have-
whatever.
What do you have against it?
If we're just gonna randomly do a time travel episode for no damn reason at the end of a 7-season series, I needed to connect to these characters more.
Like, you were like, why are we doing this? It's because it's season 7. Why did we go back to this time period? Because that's what Hollywood does. You're gonna tell me when we went to the 1950s, I believe it was, with Leave It to Beaver, that made sense when we did.
I told you it didn't make sense then either. I've never thought a time travel episode has made sense in this series.
Yes,
they do not belong.
When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Brum Meets World.
When this Brum Meets World.
Your Boy Meets World fan cast. I'm Ceej.
I'm Tony Curtis.
Tony, Count. Again, one step closer, almost there. Gonna wrap it up.
Honestly, like it's such a shame because we're getting to the end, and I just finished watching this episode, and I'm like, the end can come. The end can come at this point. After this episode, whew, I have some thoughts, guys. I'm not a fan.
I find that so hilarious. We're gonna get into it, but I'm realizing you and I are switching positions.
Oh my God.
I did not hate this episode as much as you apparently did.
You know how I feel about time travel episodes.
Yes, and that's the thing. I'm usually the same way, but I don't know. We're gonna get into it. Either way, we are back for another episode. You guys, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Pride. It's also Pride Month.
Oh,
So,
yeah, it is Pride Month. I just
saw.
saw Kesha at Pride. She was great.
You went.
I went. I saw Kesha. She put on a great show. I was a bit inebriated, but it was fantastic. Adam Lambert came out. It was great.
Someone put it out, or no, actually, not someone. Kesha put it out. This was her first show as a free woman, quote unquote. And I just thought that was amazing. I was like, oh, good for her.
My favorite thing about the show is that she's officially changed the line to wake up in the morning like fuck P. Diddy, which is great. It got a big round of applause.
Yep. I'm glad that we're there. I'm glad that
we're all maturing.
Honestly, because
Kesha.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, I know that you don't wait too long, so before we hop into the episode, do a little bit of the housekeeping, which is to say, you guys continue to reach out to us at Brum Meets World on all of the places, all the social platforms. We truly appreciate it. Check out our Patreon. It has those Pod Meets World React episodes.
Yeah. Guys, I don't know if you know this because we've been saying it every week, but there are companion episodes to every Pod Meets World episode review. Me and Ceej get on our Patreon and we review their review of the episode we've already reviewed. So take that for content.
It's a little bit of an inception, but I think we do it. I think we do it well.
I think so.
And we also have merch, which you guys can check out. So
merch,
all of the things. We appreciate it. We appreciate you, and you will appreciate us getting on with the episode. So, Tony, that means give us your tell me about it. Okay.
Tell us about it. We've officially jumped the shark. A time vortex sends Topanga back to a 40s hotel where all is white and black.
Okay. I'm digging it. I'm digging it. You guys, this is season 7, episode 20, As Time Goes By. Cory and Topanga fight over her constant studying leads Topanga to find a time continuum vortex in their closet, which transports her back to the 1940s detective noir world, where she loses her memory and adopts a new identity. There she meets a gumshoe detective who is trying to solve the mystery of her amnesia and her lifeless body in this alternate world.
Wow. Wow. All right, well, first things first, let me just apologize to our good friend and Boy Meets World writer, Erica, who wrote this episode. Because I like I said, I am not a fan of this episode. I'm not a fan of time jumps, to be honest, but this specific episode was, to me, It was a low point. It was a real low point, and I struggled.
It's so funny that you say that because in reality, I enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed it. Here's the thing. I think of all the time traveling episodes we've done, this to me, not the worst. This maybe it's because I'm a fan of Casablanca. Maybe it's because the comedy was just my type of comedy, where it's just like someone told me to let it go.
Sure.
Hey, let it go. Oh yeah, that was her. Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It's like really funny and I enjoy it. I honestly also forgot that this was Erica's episode that she wrote. So that does make me allow the Ella Fitzgerald Kennedy joke, because that was one thing where I was like, no, we are not calling a white woman Ella Fitzgerald. But also, we didn't relegate Angela to being just a performer, which is what Black people usually were relegated to in those movies.
Sure.
So I will allow it. Yeah, but yeah, it was I enjoyed myself. I don't know. That's all I'm gonna say.
You know what? I had issues with this on a micro level, on a macro level. The episode in and of itself doesn't make any attempt for the alternative dream we step into to make any sense for
Correct.
us or for the characters involved. Multiple
Correct.
times, Topanga's like, I have no idea who I am or what's going on. And they're like, great, neither do we. It's almost as if the show was saying, neither do we. And on a macro level, if we're zooming out and taking a look at, we have 3 episodes left after this.
Yep.
And so for this to be like one of the final episodes we get with these characters, we're not seeing any conclusions to any storylines. We're not knowing what's going on with Jack and Rachel and Eric's graduation. Doesn't even come up. Doesn't come up in the finale. Doesn't come up here. We don't know what's going on with some of the big things that are happening with Cory, Topanga, and Shawn. Like, there are other things we could be focusing on to wrap up a series and a season that we are ignoring for bullshit. And that's why I have an issue with this episode. And then we can get into the weeds of it, but overall, those are my first impressions.
No, I love that. I love those first impressions because I think you're right. Like, I looked at it, you guys know me. I looked at this episode as this episode.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I'm just going to focus on this episode. And you were also right in the point to where, I'm not going to lie, this definitely feels like a writer's room situation in terms of the show begins to ask, who is Topanga? We spent the last few episodes being like, who is this person? She goes, I've lost my identity.
Mhm.
And like, that's kind of like the big mystery and everything. And I was really, really happy that we were going there. And then halfway through, it just lets that go. And who is Topanga per this episode? She's a nag. She kind of gets on everyone's nerves. Something we've never seen before, but now she gets on everyone's nerves.
I disagree. This is something we've seen before. I felt like this episode was a combination of so many other episodes, specifically A Very Topanga Christmas. One in which she enters the Matthews homes, she annoys everyone involved, and everyone is kind of left thinking of her as a very type A nag,
Yes.
has to have it her way.
Yes.
So we take that, and then we throw in some, and then there were Shawn elements. Hey, we're going to go to an alternate world. There's going to be a murder mystery. There's going to be 2 of a version of one character, and one of them killed someone. And it's just like, it felt like a mashup of all of these different episodes we've done. But again, I don't know that Cory, Topanga, Eric, I don't know that the events of this episode mean anything for them. I don't know that they come back. I don't know that any of this mattered.
No, okay. So a few things. We're going to take this piece by piece. But first is to say that I agree with you in, do the events of this episode even matter? And I would say I don't know, because based on the setup, like, let's start with, like, we crawl into a vortex, but that vortex is not played to be a dream sequence. It's played to be an actual vortex, similar to how Salem the cat actually existed, and therefore we were able to go back through time. But then we are seeing that it's not just a time vortex, it's also kind of a dream sequence. But then it's also not a dream sequence, because even though that's how we exit this setup, we end with the Eric character, the Eric stand-in, being they are kind of like Twilight Zone. So it's like, or is this a Twilight Zone episode? We have 3 different setups or placements into where this episode could take place. And I actually don't mind if we would have stuck to either one of them.
Hearing
But
you explain this is like hearing someone trying to listening to someone now trying to explain the Marvel multiverse. It's so convoluted and it's so all over the place and the rules aren't consistent. At one point, you have Black and White Eric going back through the vortex, seeing real life Cory. Real life Cory says he thinks this is fake, gets brought into the vortex, but then we find out later that was also a dream? Question mark. Like we're a dream inside of a dream, and the thing, it's very confusing. It's very confusing.
Absolutely. It's confusing, and B, as you were saying earlier, there are some inconsistencies just in like the idea that earlier I did point out that the Eric character is like writing down he is writing down things about Topanga and like doing his research. So like, have you ever heard of like a time continuum vortex or something like that? But then the very next scene, he sees the phone booth and the tape and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't read." And it's like, all right, again, it's small, but like in an episode that is this crazy and in this is this absurd, but also has so many character inconsistencies, not being consistent with whether or not the character can read is like it stands out. That's all I will say. Before we go any further, I'm just gonna say this. I am going to defend this episode. I do have problems with like the fact that we open up like any other noir. We don't know where this is. It could have just been the noir throughout, and like at the end they revealed that this was all a dream, or at the end they revealed, like I would have liked that. But the fact that we start with the noir, we go back to real time. We do the noir again, but then it's not the vortex, it's a dream. But then we have the Twilight Zone aspect of it. That is confusing. I'll give you that.
I'll tell you, I really disliked jumping into the noir sequence. I thought it felt really like out because I kind of like started at the end of the last episode going into this one, and it was very jarring. Also, it just like when I think of every other like dream, like episode or time alternative, we'll just call these the alternative episodes, right? Like when they went back to the 1950s or something like that, and then there was Shawn. It starts out at a point where it's like, hey, we're in the world that the audience knows and is introduced to. This one's just like, hey, we're a brand new show. If you're watching this, you are confused for the first 5 minutes of this because you have no idea what's going on, because we started in a world that is so separate from the world that we've introduced you to as an audience.
See, I disagree. And you know why? Okay. I saw this episode and my first thoughts were, I thought of the Farewell, My Laura episode of Family Matters, which is season 3, episode 25. I thought of Up the Ladder to the Roof, of Living Single, which is season 5, episode 6. And I thought of the entire 8th season of Archer. All of those are time episodes where you kind of get some like explanation of like what's going on. But if you're going to do a true noir, they kind of drop you in the middle of the story. That's what Sunset Boulevard does. That's what Casablanca. Again, like you are entering into this world where things already kind of...
You are a bit biased to a murder mystery.
I am biased to a murder
mystery
but
story.
Here's the thing, because I'm biased to a murder mystery, I know the genre. And all I'm saying is, if again, Archer season 8, we open up Sunset Boulevard, we open up like the idea of like
that may be true. I'm just saying this own show has done this better with And Then There Was Shawn. And Then There Was Shawn is a murder mystery that does all of these things better.
Oh, here's the thing, but like here's the thing, doing it better is different from doing it genre specific. And I'm saying that this episode is correct in opening up with saying, hey, there's a dead body. There are a list of suspects. There is a detective who's on the case. Like all of that is accurate. That's what you do in these movies. Which
Here's
is
a question.
You
know what? You may be right. Why are we doing this noir thing anyway.
Why
may
are we
be
doing
true.
it now?
Yeah, why are we doing
Yes.
it now? Like, you're right. This may be true to the genre. Why is this the genre? And when we went back to the like war, like when it was like Shanzi or whatever in the 1950s,
Yeah.
they were learning about the Cold War. And so they were learning about the Cold War in school, which prompts the dream. When they go back into war times in the 1940s, they're learning about the war. They're like, huh, can you imagine getting married in high school? And then they go back in time to it. In this episode, Cory's watching fucking Wile E. Coyote. There's no reference to a 1940s Casablanca. He's not watching Casablanca. He's not watching a black and white movie. Why is this what was chosen? It would make more sense for them to jump into an animated Acme universe based off of what's brought up in the opening sequence of Cory and Topanga.
It's so funny that you say that, because I do agree that the use of cartoons didn't make sense. Like, using all the references, and to the point to where she goes, this isn't a, sorry, to the point to where Cory goes, this isn't real. This is a cartoon. I'm like, it's not a cartoon. It's a movie. Why weren't you watching movies? Why isn't he watching Turner Classic Films? Why isn't he watching, I mean, like, he could have been watching The Three Stooges, which, you know, had
The Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone. Like all of those things would make sense and still be Cory goofing off. There are elements to this that I'm not gonna fight you on, because the whys are piling up 100%. But I enjoyed this as someone who is a fan of noirs, who is a fan of murder mysteries, who is a fan of like this kind of like old Hollywood feel, and who is a fan of the type of comedy it was giving us. I enjoyed this episode.
Ceej,
but
I'm so glad you enjoyed yourself. I'm so glad you liked this, because we only got so much left, and this to me was a cold dinner, but it felt good for you going down, and I'm happy for that.
I'll say this: I agree with you in why are we getting this? If you're going to call it a cold dinner, I'm like, it is a cold dinner for lunch. It's like, oh yeah, we're doing this, sure. Or like, sorry, let me rephrase that. If you're gonna call this a cold dinner, it's cereal for dinner.
Yeah.
And which you know, the Kellogg Company promotes. But
boycott Kellogg.
But yeah, boycott Kellogg. Anyway, my whole point is it's cereal for dinner. And I'm like, does cereal belong at dinner? No, not
Can I
really.
tell you why? Oh, I'm having some problems with this too, is that like, okay, even if we're going to just chalk up all of the time vortex, black and white Casablanca stuff to just be a dream or magic or whatever, the base relationship between Cory and Topanga isn't even strong in this episode. I'm in no way rooting for Cory or Topanga throughout this. I'm not rooting for Eric. Like, the whole idea of making Topanga at the beginning, like when Cory's obnoxiously throwing popcorn all over their apartment, you know they got bugs in that dorm. I don't know why he does that shit. Like, he is so inconsiderate and rude, and he's obnoxious. And then to make Topanga being like, well, she's the one who needs to calm down a bit. And it's like, no, why is this the basis of this fairy tale that we're doing? Like, make it be Cory needs to grow up. Like, why does Topanga need to calm down? Like, that can't be it.
It would have been amazing if the story had turned to Topanga was like, Cory needs me, or like, you know, like there was like, she wanted to leave and they were fighting to make her stay. You know what I'm saying? Like, that would have been something. Like, if I can't have you, no one can. If Rory would have been like, I can't let you go back to him because like I deserve you, and it was like a little bit of the tension between Rory and Cory and all this other stuff, I would have loved. But the fact that she gets murdered because she's a perfectionist, and because like you had mentioned it earlier, yes, we did it with A Very Topanga Christmas, but we haven't done it since. And like, there are elements of like, oh, she makes things about her similar to how Cory does. Like, we've had that. But that's not why they are upset with her. They are upset with her because of her type A personality, because she is, to use a modern word, woke. Like, those elements.
She introduced political correctness to them, and they're like, she's got to die. She's got
Exactly.
to go.
But that part, that's the Jerry Seinfeld of it all.
Yeah.
The idea that comedy can't be comedy if you have to be mindful of people's pronouns or try not to offend people by using outdated language. Like those things are in fact villainized now, and it's interesting to see them villainized back then. It's very similar to how we made fun of therapy, or we made fun of people being vegans and all this other stuff, where it's like, no, actually you just have a problem with progress, which is funny that you go all the way back to the 1940s to prove this.
And like I said, just like on a micro level, this doesn't make sense. What would have made more sense, because really the whole thing, the whole storyline, if we want to like go with the dream that they give us, is that Topanga, her alternative character dies. Cory gets Cory gets brought in, sees that she's died. He's like, no. Like, you don't understand. Yeah, she's a pain in the ass, but it makes me a better person.
Yeah, hold on. We've gotten so far ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind a little bit in terms of this. Let's go back in time and do like this setup, because I agree with you. Everything you're saying. Topanga's trying to study, and to Topanga's point, she's like, I have the same test that you have. Why are you not worried about this? Why are you not doing any work? As a matter of fact, not only you're interrupting me while I'm trying to, which I think is valid. And to kind of be fair, he's like, hey, you always stress about these things. I'm going to do what I want to do. My one complaint with this was, why is this a surprise to Topanga? She should know by now what type of person Cory is. So she should know by now his studying habits.
But
that's the one thing
what I'll say is that we've been shown like different things with Cory. Some seasons, Cory doesn't give a fuck about school. He doesn't care.
Most seasons.
He's like early seasons too. He was like, if he gets a C, that's great, whatever. But in high school, and like we saw him studying for exams, like we saw him and Shawn preparing to take SATs
for
together.
The big ones. For big ones.
But I'm just saying, dude, finals is here. Like, it's at the very least,
they don't say that this is the finals paper. They say that she has a paper. And I'm just saying that Cory has a history of studying when it's big. Cory is a grand gesture person. So Cory is the big things count. The little things he doesn't have to be mindful of. And that's just true to his character.
But I'm saying that, like, they had an opportunity to make this initial setup stronger. They
Agreed.
had a setup to where, like, I don't know, Topanga and Cory are fighting, and Topanga's like, I'm gonna go off in the bedroom and clean, and Cory falls asleep watching an old movie, and that's how we get here. Like, that could have been better. Like, if we're gonna make it like Cory actually appreciates Topanga, how come the whole episode is everyone unappreciating Topanga? Like, that's really like the specifics of it. That
again, zero disagreement, but that's not what we're talking about yet. What we're talking about now is just the setup. And I agree with you. Having Topanga being like, I'm gonna go into the other room and take a nap, and either her actually falling asleep and having this dream, or Cory falling asleep on the couch while watching this,
so we both agree. Falling asleep and having a dream is better than Topanga Narniing herself in through the closet into a time dimension.
100%. And I don't know why they didn't do that. Like, it's weird to introduce the time vortex of it all. And maybe they did it so that Eric would be able to go get. But again, if that's the case, then we need to stay in this world a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit more, and we need to commit to it in the end.
The thing that bothered me is that they built a whole closet set, which was the size of a bedroom, by the way.
Thank you. I wrote that. I was like,
for this Narnia moment.
In this in this apartment, you have a closet that big. You do not make it a closet. You make it a pantry. Why?
Yeah.
Because they need space. Yeah. We know that they need space. So the idea that you would have a closet this big and there's nothing else in there, I ain't buying it.
Well, there's something else in there. There's a time vortex.
There is a time vortex. And maybe that's it. Maybe like with the time vortex, there's no room for anything else.
You know, the other thing that bothered me is that they skirt over the science so quickly, they don't want you to think about any of it. Topanga goes, she's just cleaning around. She's like, hey, she immediately recognizes it. Cory, you remember those time vortex things we were learning about?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
so
yeah.
lazy. It's just like, why do we
Well, here's
have
the
to
thing,
do
it's
it this
a
way?
sitcom, and like it's
Mm.
a sitcom, and they're trying to have fun with it. And here's the thing: in this particular piece, with the setup of the time vortex continuum or whatever, I am not going to pull threads at that because quantum theory joke, by the way. But anyway, I'm not going to pull at strings because it is kind of like a yada yada situation. We are being silly with it. It
Okay.
is. I don't have a problem with that. I will go back with you and say the inconsistency is the problem.
Yeah.
Do I need you to actually like? Do I believe that Topanga is learning about quantum theory? Sure. Like, do I believe that there is one in the back of their pantry? Sure. But again, if that's the case, then we need to commit to that, and that needs to be the entrance and the exit point. We can't then wake up from it later. You know what I'm saying?
100%. And I just feel like a time travel story rarely goes well when there's not a story being told at the center of it. So, for example, Back to the
Yes.
Future, yeah, it's about time travel, but it's really about a kid getting to know his parents better. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Planet of the Apes, yeah, it's about a crazy story, but it's also about like humanity's inclination to destroy itself. Like, there's these bigger stories going on. So, my thing is that, like, if you're going to have Cory and Topanga go back in time, have the time that they go to and the events of that directly tied to something real in their life so that as an audience we can say like, because for example, and then there was Shawn is like, hey, we're not just going to jump into a time like a dream sequence, we're going to relate it to the ongoing storyline that's been happening. Cory and Topanga broke up, Shawn's upset about it, thus this is happening. They in this just brought up a whole new Cory doesn't want to study thing. We haven't talked about studying this whole time. We haven't even focused on Cory and Topanga's schooling this entire season. So for
Yeah.
them to now just throw that in as the excuse to time travel, just to me, it's not a strong enough reason.
Well, no, here's the thing. I'm with you because what I said earlier was the real problem that I have is the idea that we start to talk about Topanga and her
Yeah.
loss of identity. And you and I, like, knowing that you and I have spent so long wanting to know who Topanga is. We've literally said to ourselves last week, there's no reason for Topanga to be behaving this way. She doesn't have an identity. She doesn't know who she is outside of being married to Cory. So the idea that the episode would start with, I've lost my identity, I don't know who I am, there's a whole amnesia storyline. Yes, that's fantastic.
The way you're setting it up, I love it. And can I just say the thing that would have made this episode work for me? She goes back in time, 1968, 1969, 1970s, hippies era. And then she meets a hippie equivalent of her that's a reflection of her young self. And then these two can figure out who this person is as an adult now.
Yes, I like that's a whole different like genre that they
Of
would be
course.
doing. And I don't disagree with you. Anyone who watches Charmed would know that there's episodes where they go back in time, and the 1960s is a time in which they do this. And that would make sense for Topanga. But all I'm saying is this damsel in distress
Yeah.
actually works for the settings. The 1940s of it all, the 1940s Hollywood, the noir of it all, it really does work if you're talking about a woman who is lost. That's actually really
And
good.
you know what? You're right. But I don't want to talk about a woman who's lost. I want to talk about Topanga's identity that's lost, tied specifically to this character who has no ties to this time period.
She doesn't have any ties to this time period. However, she kind of does in the sense of let's talk about what that era was about. That era specifically was really much about women, like the femme fatale of it all. Women were gaining their power. Like women had only had the right to vote for like 20 years. And
Sure.
this idea of women being their own agents and being able to make it on their own and have jobs and stand outside of a man is brand new. And the fact that they would be punished for it, again, according to the Hays Code of any kind of woman who would come out and demand that she have agency, including her body autonomy and not need a man or anything like that, would be punished. It does make sense that a newly married college girl would have some of those same feelings. And all I'm saying is the analogy, the time period, the situation works. If you want to look at it closely, if you want this to just be a fun romp, it also works.
A woman who needs to be a woman in a world that's adapting to women's rights, you could have made this the flapper era.
Correct.
You could have still made this the 1970s.
What do you have against 1940s Hollywood?
Okay, you know what? I'm looking way too closely at this. We could just move on. This takes place in Casablanca. Whatever.
What do you have against it? Here's the thing. I'm giving you reasons why it does work. And you're still like, but what about the 70s? What about the 20s?
Because there's like, so many better options. If we're just going to randomly do a time travel episode for no damn reason at the end of a 7-season series, I needed to connect to these characters more. And you know what?
Here's the thing. I'm going to say, very much like I said with all the other things that I've told you, there are plenty, like the other time jump episodes that I've shared and all this other stuff. It is very common for Hollywood to go back to the 1940s. And if we're going to do a sitcom like this, it's very common for, like, you were like, why are we doing this? It's because it's season 7. Why did we go back to this time period? Because that's what Hollywood does.
But your reasoning is that's just what Hollywood does. That's not a reasoning that takes into account these characters in this specific show.
Yeah, okay, but you're gonna tell me when we went to the 1950s, I believe it was, with Leave It to Beaver, that made sense when we did.
I told you it didn't make sense then either. I've never thought a time travel episode has made sense in this series. Yes, they do not belong. It's a science fiction storyline.
What I'm saying is, even if we're gonna take And Then There Was Shawn, sometimes a sitcom does a one-off wacky episode. We've mentioned this before, and I can't think of it, but like How I Met Your Mother, when they did like the whole kung fu storyline episode, which did not age well, and it was really bad. We didn't need to do that. Sometimes episodes will give you wacky one-offs, and that's fine. I personally, all I'm saying is I agree with you that in season 7, you would like it to mean something more.
Yeah,
I get that.
That's all I'm saying. That's all your points are valid. I'm just saying I just want it to mean something more.
You want it to mean something more, and I get that. But all I'm saying is very often in sitcoms, we will do a one-off time-specific episode. And what's the reason? The reason was we wanted to do this, and we thought it would be fun.
They rarely work. The one thing I will say is that I really feel like they had a tape of And Then There Was Shawn, that when new writers got on board, they were like, hey, this is one of the episodes you should watch. We really liked it, to give you an idea of the show. Because this season alone, we get the wedding planning episode, we get the honeymoon episode, we get the war episode, and we get this episode that are all kind of like, I don't know if this happened. Is this a dream sequence? Does this have any bearing in real life? Like, there are so many of those this season that it feels like they're pulling from And Then There Was Shawn as inspiration.
And here's the thing, I don't disagree with you, considering that we know that they said, oh, I'll get 3 episodes on tape to watch, to pull from, and then I have to create my own script. I completely agree with you. Yeah. I also know, we remember last season, this is another thing I want to say. Remember last season when we did our Psycho episode, and you're like, oh, this episode was clearly written, inspired by Psycho. However, it goes nowhere. It doesn't make any sense. It has no narrative bearing at all. This is better than that. And that's all I'm trying to say. In terms of,
I think they're all bad.
No, we've talked about this. There will never be one that you and I are like, you nailed it, other than And Then There Was Shawn. Every single time this show does like an alternate reality, it is kind of weird and all over the place. I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying it's also very common to television. Every single time a television show does it, it's not necessarily bad. Like I said earlier, the Farewell to Laura episode, that is iconic and it's fun. And they do a lot of inside jokes like that. Up the Ladder to the Roof with Living Single, one of their more iconic episodes. Something that they do in this episode that they kind of do it every single time someone does this is you have the artist who has idea for music, but never thinks that it's gonna work. That's a very common trope of these type of things too. It's like the foresight into the future of the audience, but in the past, them not really valuing it. All of those things, again, these are classics. And I'm just saying, sometimes you don't need a reason to do a classic
But
if your television show
okay,
is classic.
so no, I understand what you're saying, but what you're arguing for is like, hey, there are classic sitcom tropes that have taken place in the tradition of television, and this is simply falling into that tradition. I don't
Correct.
disagree with that. I'm saying we need to question this tradition because if when we go back and we actually watch these shows throughout, not in syndication or not on a random Friday night, but actually binge these shows, these episodes do not work historically. So I think you're right. I think it is something that
and I think that's where we disagree. You think these episodes don't work, and I think they do. I think first of all, it creates an appreciation for a genre. Like the idea of and again, what's funny,
unappreciate this genre.
yeah,
though.
but and here's the thing. I think that that's kind of like the thing because I watch this as someone who's a huge fan of noirs, and so when I see this, I'm like, oh, they start off so well, and I appreciate the effort. But I also see a writer's room pivot halfway through,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I can't blame this episode completely because its setup tells me everything that should have been about this episode. And your point, we had almost had and then there was Shawn moment where by Topanga being in this alternate reality, she was able to learn something about herself. If she, like I said, if you and I talked about this, if she is there and she loses her identity, but she slowly remembers things about herself that she would miss, or including Cory, if we want to go there, or if it's this idea of she remembers how great of a person she is, and very much like Cory, she has a man trying to hold her back. Like there's a point in time where, again, for me, I'm like, if this is a dream sequence, they kind of call Cory out. It's like, oh, my job is to just have a good time. I don't really have any intentions. I don't really have any drive. I don't really have any purpose. And she's like, oh, okay. Like that would have been, this is good conversations, but it seemed like someone wanted to make a point of Topanga doesn't know herself anymore and she's lost herself in this marriage. And then they wanted to bring it back and be like, yeah, but her marriage is important to her.
Yeah, okay. Just because we've been talking about this episode so long and we haven't even gotten really into the plot, I'm gonna let go of the time travel thing. I'm just gonna let it go. It's happening. It is the way it is, and it's set up.
Before you do, I mean, this is our podcast.
Yeah.
My whole thing is before you do, this is our last time jump episode of the series.
Yeah.
So that being said, we have rights to analyze time jump. We've looked at them all at this point in time.
And 100%. And again, like there are things about this that to me still don't make sense. And I'm sure we're going to go through it more, but like, it's not Topanga's story. The lesson that needs to be learned is Cory to be like, wow, Topanga's actually helping me. And that's the realization that he goes on when he's brought in midway through. Like,
agreed.
Just like Janet Leigh in Psycho, she dies and then a new person is brought through and then they have the final end girl journey. And that's what kind of happens with Cory here. Like if this whole thing should have been Cory in the 1940s.
I agree. Like if we make it to where Cory is the one who goes back, like say Cory was like, oh, I need salt for my popcorn. Yeah. And he accidentally goes into the pantry and to the vortex. And then he's just Rory. And later on, we find out he killed Trixie, and there's some resentment still there.
Yeah.
Or the need and appreciation of Topanga. Like, I agree with you there. Or if we want to, the idea that Topanga is the one who goes back, but to your point, that Topanga is the one who needs to learn the lesson. I'm with you there. I will not disagree.
Do you think this is Cory's dream or Topanga's dream? Or do you think all of this is happening in real life events?
I honestly don't know. I told you the problem with it is we get 3 different setups. So because we get 3 different setups, I'm with you in the sense that it doesn't make sense in what we've been told. I'm simply defending the one-off Casablanca influenced episode. That's it.
Speaking of Casablanca influence, there's some things that we need to talk about.
Okay, speaking of which, really quickly, you brought up Casablanca. The title of this episode, As Time Goes By, is the name of the song in Casablanca. That's number one. Then we also have the idea of a lot of the characters are kind of like mirrors of characters who are in Casablanca.
Like Fezhead?
Yes, hey, that was an actual, like, that's not necessarily what he should have been called, but that
No.
is a character. That character is played by, hold on one second. That character, I believe, is played by Peter Lorre.
I was born in 1987. I have no idea who these people are in the original Casablanca. But what I will say is that the Feeney Allen, hey, they're always
yeah.
together, people talk, gay panic
Yep.
moment. I was just like, there's no need for any of this. Like, were they having fun? Do you feel like the cast was having fun? Because I don't feel like they were having fun, as much fun as they've had with previous episodes.
Here's the thing, I don't know, and we'd have to ask them. And I say that because this one, they didn't seem to be having as much fun, but also other characters got to do stuff that they don't always get to do. Will, he looks like he's having fun.
Yeah.
Trina gets to shine in this.
I thought the same thing about Maitland. I thought
Maitland does a really good job. Like, they get their characters and they're having fun with it. And I'm like, this is like, even Amy
singing again.
Betsy is out there singing on the piano. That's fun. We get Matthew Lawrence singing. That's fun. And playing the piano. I don't know if he can really play the piano.
I don't think he does, but he does sing. We
does
did hear him sing, yeah.
But we do get this weird transition of the singing.
We get this weird auto-tune Backstreet Boys run at the end of his song. It's so strange.
That was very weird. But like, I enjoyed the two characters that I would say feel over it are Ryder,
yes,
and Ben.
I would even
Ryder and Ben feel like
doesn't even look like she's having a lot of fun with this.
I disagree. I felt like Danielle played again, and maybe you don't know the Veronica Lake of it all, like the hair over the eye in the swoop, like the ability to kind of like lean into it, and kind of like the first half of Danielle is really enjoying this. The second half of the story, it does become more, hey, this character is a nag. And I can imagine not enjoying that as much, because you go from being someone who is learning yourself and getting to play into this identity, and then out of nowhere it shifts and you have to play a nag again. I can imagine that not hitting Danielle right. I cannot wait till they get to this episode. But yeah,
to that point, you know what really bugs me the most is that, like, we've talked about this, how 7 seasons in, Topanga was not the character that we had remembered her from our childhood. She was not as involved in the storyline. She was not centered at all. She doesn't really have a life outside of being Cory's companion. Here is one episode that is Topanga centered. We get an adult Topanga leading an episode going into presumably her mind, her imaginations, her dreams, her fears, her nightmare, whatever you want to call it. This is going into her. And in this, she is still making everything about Cory. We're not learning anything about her. She's not doing any self-exploration. She's not thinking about like her parents' marriage or anything, divorce ending. There's no thing that she is focused on other than either learning to be a better woman for Cory or like helping Cory to get to his best self.
And this is what I say when the episode pivots. When the episode has her become a nag and they're like, oh, she's ruining it. That's when I was like, oh, you guys dropped the ball. Because the first half, the I don't know who I am, the help me out, I've lost myself, that is starting to beg some questions. That is a woman looking at the situation in her life being like, I was a smart, motivated, world-changing character, even like if we want to take it outside of a television show, that's who I was as a young person. Then I escaped into getting married. I got married young, and now I'm just relegated to being someone's wife, and even my husband doesn't take me seriously. That is a great exploration, and I feel like, again, the idea that Erica Montofa in real life wrote this makes me feel like there was a conversation about, hey, this is what she would be feeling. But it also feels like, very much like we've seen this entire season, the episode bends over backwards to make Cory the hero and make Cory's goofballness be endearing and being like, you know what? I need her, but she needs me. She needs to sit on the couch and watch cartoons because even though, as you said, graduation is a few weeks away, and the fact that she's obsessing about school and all this other stuff would make sense, I don't want to, and therefore she shouldn't want to.
There's a few things I want to say to that. One, this whole "you're stressed, you need to relax" storyline, one we've done before.
Yep.
Specifically when Eric was taking midterms and he told everyone to take someone to the movies with a shoe. So we've done that storyline before. The storyline of, oh, I just want to forget. I'm going to go into this world and I'm going to ignore responsibilities and I don't want to go back home. What are you talking about? That's the honeymoon episode. We did that earlier this season too. So there's things that we're hitting which makes this all a little unsatisfying across the board. I would just say that, like, it would have been really cool if, like, instead of a time travel thing, maybe we did an alternative timeline. Maybe Topanga went to see Yale Topanga, the Topanga who decided to go to Yale, and maybe everything's kind of like not what she fantasized
We've already
in
done
her
that.
head.
We've already done that with our
You know what?
flash forward
I'm
episode.
fine. And you know what? I'm fine. I'm fine with Topanga still coming to grips with the Yale decision because I still feel like she ain't over it yet. And so
I know you ain't.
I know. But I'm just saying, like, there's so many things that we could have done. I'm going down this rabbit hole again. Whatever. We're in Casablanca. Topanga dies.
Yes.
And like we said, we have this weird, like, perception jump where black and white Eric comes to colored Cory. I don't want to call him colored Cory. Goes to present day Cory, pulls him back into black and white. I don't know what's going on there. I'm just going to ignore it. We find out that, and this is and then there was Shawn moment where we have alternative Cory and regular Cory, and regular Cory's like, you killed this person, and you're like, yeah, I did it. And it was like, oh, this feels beat for beat. And then there was Shawn in this moment.
Well, so to that point, the having Rory be the killer makes sense again thematically in terms of it makes sense in terms of noirs. And it kind of makes sense, but also it doesn't really stick to it. And I kind of do wish that, like, they either did the thing where it's like everyone had a reason to, and so everyone did, and they were all ganging up on her, or she was playing dead and this was never a real thing. Like, even Eric the detective was able to put it together. It's like, oh wait, she's not dead. She's still trying to escape from her identity. You know, something like that would have been really good, especially since, or just have her quote unquote go missing again. Because right now we're not using her in this scene. We just made everything about Cory.
And also, to make this whole storyline the premise of someone killed Topanga, we need to find out who it is, only at the end to be like, she ain't dead, makes the whole thing purposeless.
Exactly, which is why I wish instead of her being dead, it would have been like, oh, that's actually not her body. It was so, you know, like, if there are things we could have done to, like, have this. Like, it's so funny because you came in so strong. I have to defend this more because there is so much good. Let's talk about a little bit of the fun stuff. Let's talk about Angel. Enough said. Like, the idea of, like, that's Angel. Enough said.
I gotta be honest. The jokes in this episode did not work for me.
Beauty and no brains, a dangerous combination. I'm talking about me. That's fun.
There's so many of those, like, little, like, word jokes that something told me my services are no longer needed. Your services are no longer needed. Where I'm just like, wow, these are kind of happening a lot. I don't know. Like,
that's the fun of it all.
Again,
no longer a wordsmith. Here's like, I'm gonna say this. It's so clear that you're just done with this season, and I can't like fight for it. But I'm saying for you to not have any fun with this episode is more so because you're mad that this episode is, like, close to our end. We're so close to the end and we have nothing to show for it.
You know what? Possibly,
and I get that.
Possibly, but I would challenge our listeners to go back and listen to me talk about any time travel episode and see if I don't come in just as hot.
Hey, and look, one thing that we are known for, Pod Meets World are like, they don't like the time jump episodes, and we don't.
No.
But I think that that's because when you pull us out of a storyline that we've been building for a season
Mhm.
and it doesn't really go anywhere and it doesn't really build to the characters, that is frustrating because to your point, let's take and then there was Shawn. That was a pivotal moment in Shawn's character. The episode ends with Shawn being like, oh, wait, I'm affected by Cory and Topanga's breakup.
100%.
Like, if this would have ended with Danielle, like, actually, if anything, it would make sense for Topanga's character to make a realization, oh, I've put my life on hold. And for her to end in the episode now, since we only have but so many episodes left, and say, Cory, I want to move to New York.
Yeah,
you know, like
something.
if that's the thing where it's like we put in, like as you said, we're winding to the end. So if we're winding towards the end, if Topanga leaves this dream where she says, hey, I've lost my identity, and instead goes, Cory, we need to make a change, and it just ends right there, fantastic. You know?
It doesn't do any of that.
Yeah,
You know
and
what?
I agree with
I
you.
would even say this, that like if you go back and you watch the season 5, like Cory Topanga Lauren breakup saga, like I think that's
Yeah.
like a 6-episode saga that goes through. And you cannot remove and then there was Shawn, and then that series still work. I think that that episode is pivotal, even though it's all a dream sequence. It has a real life impact at the end when Shawn's like apologizes and says, I'm the reason we're on detention and I'm taking this too hard, and like he comes to a real life realization at the end of this episode. I just don't know that there are any real life consequences for the things that have taken place.
I agree.
And like I was, one of the things that made me go like, whose dream are we in, whose reality are we in right now, is when Cory finds Topanga dead, he has almost zero reaction. He goes, why would anyone do this? It's like, that's your reaction to your wife dead, bro? Like,
I agree.
we need to unpack that a little bit. Like, that's what I mean. I'm like, whose reality are we in that he is so like nonchalant about finding his dead wife on the floor? It's weird.
Well, this is what I'm saying. The first half of the episode, it's Topanga.
Yeah.
And then the second half of the episode, we bring Cory back into it. And because we've shifted who the main character is in this own dream sequence, that like it's literally that act break happens, we come back, and now that Cory's in the picture, it stops being about Topanga. And I agree with you, because there is so much for Cory to unpack in the idea that he wasn't bothered, and he knew immediately. And he goes, I would have never have done this. Well, I mean, maybe I would have. And it's like, okay, so yeah, now we're talking about Cory's subconscious.
Sure.
And I get that. And we've done Cory's subconscious before, and it being centered around Topanga. And then him coming to the conclusion that Topanga is worth it. Like, all of that, I agree with you, would have been good, would have been nice. It is absolutely clear to me that half of the episode, if you look at it just in like this first half, is about Topanga. Great. It's the second half where everything really falls apart because everything shifts its original target.
If I could just do a comparison of genres a little bit. I am a musical person, as you may know.
I would have loved, yes.
And one of the things I know about a good musical is that like a song has to come when a character is feeling something that they cannot put into words. It is so strong that they have to sing it. And that's what compels them to kind of move into song, right? Like that's what makes a great musical. I feel like the TV equivalent to that is there are things happening in our real world that we've established that are so intense that we have to move into a dream sequence or something, an alternative world, so that we can make this make sense on a base level. So an example of that would be, and then there was Shawn, or another example would be War and Peace. Like our friend group is breaking up and we don't know what to do. We're gonna have like a 2-episode series about our friend group literally not being friends anymore. The only way to make that work is to now have this dream sequence, which helps kind of paint a clearer picture for everything. The conflict that sparks this time jump in this episode is nothing, is no conflict.
It's not no conflict. In
comparison
conflict,
to Cory and Topanga breaking up, or their friend group breaking up,
yes,
or some of these other things
yes,
that have happened that have prompted a dream sequence,
yes,
I don't know that this
the very big
compares.
conflict in the beginning is in fact the very big conflict in the beginning is Topanga being dissatisfied with her marriage with Cory.
But that's not a conflict. That's a reality at this point.
Yeah, but that's the point. The point is the fact that she goes in there and she's missing her identity is the conflict. She is questioning it. The idea that they would have Topanga question her choices and where she's at and who is she now that she's Mrs. Goodtime. That is important.
I love that you saw this episode and thought, wow, they're like Topanga's wondering who she is and her identity and questioning that. And that relates to Topanga because of all these things we've seen. I don't know that anyone writing this episode or in that writer's room did that same thing.
I disagree. Don't put that line in there.
I think it was, guys, we have access to these 1940s sets. Can we work this in? Topanga losing her memory was simply to like get the gumshoe thing in there. I don't think it has any relationship. And the reason why I say that is because there is no fulfillment of any of those ideas of Topanga's lost identity, of her finding herself. Like those don't come to fruition. You know what does come to fruition? Her making Cory a better person.
You're wrong, because I just texted Erica and I was like, Erica, what inspired you to write As Time Goes By? And when she comes back, you will hear that it was not
you
just
said
because they had access.
Her answer yet?
Well, yeah, I didn't get her answer yet.
Even if Erica was like, hey, we wanted to explore Topanga's identity as a married woman and all of that stuff, none of it actualizes. None of that ends up affecting the ultimate storyline. The storyline ends up being about Cory reaching his self-actualization through Topanga.
I agree with you. I said that I think that this is how the conversation started. And I also said that I feel like the writer's room pivoted to make Cory the center of this conversation. So in terms of it doesn't pay off, I agree with you. Yeah. But you also said that no one in that writer's room thought to themselves, what would be the motivating factor of doing something like this? And they literally call it the case of the missing identity.
You know,
that's what
honestly,
it's about.
If they did have that conversation, good for them. The third act of this episode would suggest otherwise.
And Ceej has not disagreed with you on that point. Not once.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna see what Erica's saying. I'm gonna get back to y'all.
I feel bad. Like, I feel bad talking to her about this episode because I love so much of her work, but this episode to me just did not hit at all. But obviously everyone can understand that. But like, I love Erica. She's great. She does great work. This episode was not it for me.
But we've talked about this plenty of times. There are episodes that you will defend with your life, and I'm like, I could care less. Don't need it. Don't care. And everybody doesn't have to like everything. I will say you painted a picture to me about this episode that I was so ready to just throw it all out. And I watched this episode and I was like, there's good stuff here. But I will also agree with you that this episode comes at a time where you're like, we have 4 episodes left. Even that,
what are we doing with
4 episodes
left? We have Angela's Ashes,
episodes.
and then we have the 2-parter finale. This is basically the 3rd to last episode.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the 3rd to last episode, technically. We have so much that we need to resolve in terms of our friend group. Even if you didn't know that you were not coming back for a final season, which at this point in time, I would assume you did. But you would hope that, again, I think that this would have been a great time. Imagine a world in which Topanga wakes up from her dream or comes out of the vortex herself and says, Cory, I've been thinking a lot about us. I've been thinking a lot about who I used to be, and we've got to make a change. And it ends. And then the next episode, Angela's ashes, or again, if Topanga would have been like, I want to move to New York, I want to apply for this scholarship or whatever. If that's how it ends, and then the next episode, we have Angela's ashes, which is Angela's final episode. And then the next episode is them going to New York and packing up and all this other stuff. It makes more narrative sense for you to use this moment in Topanga's marriage, in her life as a college student, in her relationship with her husband, in her relationship with herself. It makes sense to take this moment for her to now be like, I need a change. And that explains the next 2 episodes in which our entire world changes.
I really wish that if we're just playing make believe here and we're changing this is the episode basically, before the end, before the setup of the end. I really wish we would have gotten an episode that was more like the things change episode from season 5.
Yeah.
That's the one where Cory goes to Chubby's and things are different. It's a transitional episode before the graduation episode. I would have loved this episode to be centered around Eric, Jack, and Rachel graduating. Regardless of a finale or not, Eric worked so hard to get into college, and the fact that he graduates college and we don't have a moment between him and Feeney celebrating his accomplishments, how hard he worked, everything he did to get through college is all kind of just whatever. That's really heartbreaking to me in my investment into Eric's characters, especially after rewatching season 4. I'm like, this dude worked so hard for college, and then he just graduates and we don't even hear about it. Have that going on while Topanga maybe has an internship that gets her to that next level, at the B story, where she's like, hey, I think I want to go to New York. Make this all kind of lead to something. I think that would have been a way better use of this episode and would have mattered, because I will any fan of Boy Meets World, I could say that they could watch this entire series, and if this episode was missing, they would miss nothing.
I agree. I think, and that's kind of the problem with the last 2 episodes, is that you could remove these last 2 episodes and you've removed nothing. You've changed. There are 0 consequences.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't needed in order to push the story forward. And to your point, knowing that we only have 3 episodes, and that's if you include the last one as a 2-parter, we only have 3 episodes left to tell the story that we want to tell, and you've wasted 2 of them not telling us anything new. I agree with you, which is why I will stand by. This episode starts with such a great premise, such a great thesis, and if it would have ended with Topanga being like, I need a change, it would have been so much better. Because it would have done what you said, which is given some weight to this episode.
It's also just kind of confusing and choppy, even if you're trying to follow it for what it's giving you. Agreed. If you're like, I'm on board, I'm in this dream sequence, I love the 1940s or whatever, and you love this episode, tell me, at what point does the episode shift from Casablanca back to Topanga studying and Cory watching TV? We never see her come back. It just kind of fades, which is not the way we got there.
Correct.
Are we supposed to believe that in the real world, Cory and Topanga argued for a bit, Topanga went to the closet and then started working on her studying again, and then that's it? I'm trying to work around this to make it make sense, but the ending makes it really hard to do so.
And I agree. I agree. The final act doesn't make sense. The fact that Cory just is like, hey, wake up. And then we wake up, but they're both on different sides. It would have made sense. Oh my God. Imagine if Cory got up and...
I don't even think he says wake up. I think we just cut to her on her computer and him watching TV.
No, but... What I was going to say is, imagine if we leave that little dream sequence and Topanga has fallen asleep at the computer. Like, you know, like even if we would have shown she had fallen asleep at the computer and Cory only came up to get some salt, you know, and like he accidentally woke her up and I was like, oh, I guess you were sleeping or something like that. Again, I'm with you where it's like your ending doesn't make sense. I will not fault that. It doesn't. We are inconsistent in that. With having the detective there at the end, it's very Twilight Zone. And does any of this matter? I'm with you there. I just have to say that everything else that we do, having Amy being able to sing again on the piano, at this point in time, it's established, so it makes sense. Having to see our characters not only have like different personas and different names, but getting to see Rusty and Will play together and kind of be like this duo. Getting to see Amy and Jack be together and play a duo.
I really have to wonder how William Daniels felt because in season 1 he was really a powerhouse, and now he's like they bring me in like once every 5 episodes. Now I'm in a fizz hat for some reason. Like he must be so confused as to what his role in the show is at this point.
And to be fair, they already said that they were trying to make room for the parents. So like, or even for like the older dynamic. So I don't know if he's as confused or if he's just like accepted that, hey, this is season 7. This is what we're doing. I feel like a lot of this episode was the cast just being like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Like I said, Ryder is very much like has very limited scenes. He's behind the bar. I feel like this is some of the least amount of work we've given Ryder to do.
Yeah.
But we do give the other characters who don't always get a moment to shine this season to have fun.
Well, I would say that even Will, who is able to make a lot of things fun, isn't the funniest I've ever seen him in this episode. No. And I don't know that this episode gives him a lot to work with. So many of his jokes are just like voiceover jokes. Yeah. That like I you know what? I'm ready to move on. I've torn this episode a bit. The very last thing on my notes, the last thing I wrote was, I have no idea what I saw. And so I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay. I think it's so funny. I can't say we haven't had, but we have so few episodes where we can't find anything to agree on. Yeah. And I find it amazing that this is one of them. Don't get me wrong. I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. You told me you hated this episode.
From the time we started the series, I was like, hey, there's a few episodes, and this was the one I was talking about.
This is the one that you've constantly talked about.
Yeah.
I think I watched it being like, oh, there were some things here. And so I expected you to have some things, and you were like, no, I don't like any of it. None of these get script out. And in all honesty, that is your right. But I wanted to give a voice to the people who did enjoy this episode, who did find something in it, and also give credit to the cast for at least making the most of this Casablanca set.
They did that.
Okay, moving forward, what is your bruh moment from this?
I guess everyone wanting to kill Topanga because she introduced political correctness.
Yes, thank you. I was like, I had a problem with the idea of them being like, oh, we can't say dame anymore, which by the way, the song that Matthew Lawrence plays is called The Dames. So I just think it's really funny. But anyway, we can't say dame anymore. It's like derogatory towards women. But then also them all turning and being like, oh, she introduced political correctness and that's why everyone hates her. And it's just like, especially living in the world that we live in now where people misuse the word woke.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we could have done better.
Across the board.
My is going to be like, so that was going to be one, but also I wanted to at least flag the idea of Bez and Costello hanging out and then be like, they're together all the time. People talk. Yeah. And then like the gay panic moment of it. Sure. I'm with you. Like we didn't need that. Okay. What was your Feeny lesson of this episode?
You tell me, bruh. You tell me.
Okay, I'm with you in the sense that I'm not really sure if we get like a full lesson, but I will say the takeaway can be that you need balance. You do need someone who's going to hold you to task and try to make you better, but you also, for those type A personalities, you could benefit from having someone in your life who allows you and reminds you to relax. Like
Wow.
that's what I think the takeaway is.
Yeah, and it would have been nice to watch an episode where that was what I got after watching it.
Not everything's about you.
All right, fair. I'm not the boy
also
this
something
week.
that I forgot to point out. They say Eric's drunk. And I was like, oh, wait, we're acknowledging that. And then afterwards, Cory says, all right, you want to go put on Topanga's shoes again? Let's go put on Topanga's shoes. And I was like,
He's
again?
like, Topanga, he's drunk again. I'm like, is that what he thinks is happening every time Eric comes over? Like, he's like, why am I here? He's like, well, you're usually lost. Are you lost? Are you drunk? How often is this happening?
Well, honestly, let's explore this a little bit. Is Eric just drunk every time he's being stupid? That would explain a lot of things. It would explain a lot of things, and including why his brother and his family is just kind of like, you guys know we can't leave him alone.
Yeah.
But again, nothing to say about the let's put on Topanga's shoes again.
It's all bad. I don't know.
Okay, what grade are you giving this?
You know damn well what grade I'm giving this one.
No, I actually don't. I really have no idea.
I'm giving this, okay, you know what? I'll say D-. How about that?
D-. Whoa, were you
D-.
actually gonna just pull the ripcord and give it like the worst grade you could think of?
It's not an F because like there are some moments I guess where the cast was charming, but yeah, it might as well be. Like it's a real like skipper for me. 100%. I would not have watched that episode if it wasn't required for this podcast.
Okay. I'm gonna give this a C+. I will not pretend like it doesn't have its flaws, but for doing a period piece, for trying to do a genre, for making allusions to Casablanca and other Hollywood noirs, for having humor that is definitely in my lane, I thought it was worth my time and an episode I would be willing to watch again. So I would give it a C+.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, you guys, you have to let us know what side of the fence you sit on. Are you pro this episode? Do you think that it's the bane of the existence of the entire series? Make sure that you reach out to us at Brummies World and let us know.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you an exclusive news announcement, introducing the Brummies World podcast Patreon. Over to you, Ceej.
That's right, Tony. When you join our Patreon as a Gold Star member, you get to dive into ad-free listening for just $3 a month. That's $3 a month to enjoy commercial-free listening to our latest episodes.
Now, Ceej, does this mean our listeners get to immerse themselves in bonus content, including extended episodes, exclusive Pod Meets World reviews, and our coverage of My Date with the President's Daughter?
That's right, Tony. And snag a sweet discount on our awesome Brummies World merchandise. And join the conversation to our Patreon polls. Unlock a world of exclusive content at patreon.com/BrummiesWorld. Back to you, Tony.
Thanks, Ceej. By becoming a patron, you're not just supporting the show, you're getting VIP access to content you won't find anywhere else. For just $3 a month, enjoy the luxury of ad-free listening and join an exclusive club where the fun never stops. Back to you, Ceej.
Thanks, Tony. Don't miss out on the action. Join us at Patreon today and get you some Tony and Ceej time. Your support means the world to us. That's patreon.com/BrumMeetsWorld. Back to you, Tony.
Elevate yourself from a basic listener to an official member of the Brum Meets World family. Now, back to the episode.
We are going to talk about our homework now. Tony, what homework do you have?
I started watching Fallout on Amazon. I don't know if you're familiar. Fallout is a post-apocalyptic, like Los Angeles, like TV show. It's based off of a video game. Basically, like, you know, there's a nuclear apocalypse or whatever that happens, and we flash forward like 200 years. And so we see like just what's happened in the world. There's like people who live underground and some people who live above ground, and there's like a fight for resources, but it's like a very cool show. Like I saw the pilot and I was like, oh, I'm immediately in. Like I saw like the first like half hour of the pilot and I was like, okay, you won me over. I'm in. I'm a few episodes in at this point and it's all really well done. It's really interesting. The characters are really unique. Again, I'm not familiar with the game, so I know that this is all based off of a video game. I'm not really a video gamer, but
Mhm.
that not playing the game or not knowing anything about it did not affect my enjoyment of this show. So, if you're looking for like a really like cool, like almost like in the vein of The Boys in terms of like violence and
Yeah.
humor, this is a great like one to check out.
It's so funny. I've heard really good things about it, and I kind of wanted to check it out. I've not played the games. I don't really know that much about it, but I do know that it is one of the TV series that everyone says was adapted really well.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely add it to my list.
One of the things I really love about it, just while I'm talking to you, it's the future, but it's all based off of this like 1960s retro future tech. So like it's
Mhm.
like if the bombs dropped in the 60s and then technology kept going, like all of the
Yeah.
tech kind of looks like the 1960s. It just has a very unique feel to it in a way
Yeah.
that I'm just like, wow, this is like I feel like with Marvel, like I see the future and like some of these other like shows and movies, the future all looks the same. It's nice to have a future that just looks completely like alternative timeline.
Yeah, it
So that's cool.
feels a little steampunky. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
like how steampunk is just kind of like if technology hit like the Victorian age in like that way. I
Well,
kind of
that's
feel like the
well, that's the thing that separates. It's like steelpunk above ground, but below ground, they're still carrying on the traditions from the rich people who were able to survive the 1960s. So
Mm.
below ground, it's more like a catch me if you can 1960s like vibe, whereas above ground, it's like that's not what's happening for the rest of the world who weren't able to like save themselves underground.
Oh, that's cool. See, no one's ever told me about the below ground part of this.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is
yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, no, I'm down. I'm down. Yeah, I
It's
like that.
basically what billionaires are doing now. They're building their
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
We
yeah.
have no hope, and I don't even want to get into it. But yeah, that's cool. Speaking of billionaires, my homework this week,
Ooh.
by the time it's out, I think more of the episodes should be out, but it is a new show on Hulu called Clip. And
Oh,
it
okay.
is the story about the Clippers and the downfall of the owner of the Clippers,
Ooh.
Donald Sterling. And for those of you who remember in 2013, I believe it was, there was this whole scandal about what he was saying and like what he said the white owner said about his black team players and other black people who are in the basketball industry. All of this happened because the kind of woman he was having an affair with um recorded every conversation that he was saying, and there was a lot of things that came out when he thought no one was listening.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is such an interesting show to watch because it really does try to analyze the role that social media and influencers played, this idea of a white guy being the owner of a black team, but being racist, but also hiring Doc Rivers, who's like a legendary black basketball coach.
Mm.
And in this show, it stars Lawrence Fishburne as Doc Rivers and also Ed O'Neill as Donald Sterling. And a lot of people are saying like they're having trouble like letting go of Ed O'Neill's just charisma when they watch this really horrific
Wow.
guy
Yeah.
who's Don O'Neill. Anyway, I think everyone should check it out because it's actually really interesting. It's less about the basketball and more about like the scandal that took down. And I think that's even kind of like
Yeah.
why it's called a Clip, because you have this team that was actually starting to turn itself around that just got sideswiped by this scandal. And yeah, I think it's worth listening. I'm a little biased because a friend of mine is the hand model for the cover art of it. Once she got the gig, she shared it with us. We knew about the show, but also Hulu must believe in this show because they have been promoting it everywhere. Like you
Yeah.
cannot walk in LA and not see this show advertised. But we checked it out and we actually really enjoyed it. So I actually think that people should as well.
I was gonna say the Clippers are actually doing pretty well or have done pretty well this year. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but yeah, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, it's funny because the whole point of the series is the Clippers went from being this team that like never had a chance, no one
Mhm.
ever cared about. I think it was just like one of the worst teams in the league, and then it was able to turn itself around, but that did not come at a cost.
Yeah.
So yeah, Okay. You guys, let us know what you're watching. Let us know what you think about our recommendations. We appreciate your comments. Throw it in the chat. Also, again, I'm going to say this. Whose side are you on? Do you think this episode had merit? Or do you think that we both were yelling into the void? Because I got to tell you, we do that sometimes.
Here's what I'll say. Now that this episode is like finished and we can stop talking about this episode, I would say we are at the end.
Yes.
Angela's Ashes might as well be part one of a three-parter because she ends and then the she leaves and then this the finale, all the other characters leave. It's basically one giant finale from this point out. So I'm gonna say we're in our swan song. This is the end. And I am very sad because the 3 episodes that come next, I think are all very good and they will make me cry. But yeah, like now that this episode's done, I'm looking forward to the next 3 episodes, but I'm also sad because they're so good and I'm gonna miss these characters.
I completely understand. I agree with you. That said, you did remind me that we want to give a special shout out to Trina McGee. Who at this point in time has announced that she is pregnant. So best of luck to her, health to her and the baby and her family. Congratulations. And we are really excited to explore one of the really important episodes with her next week, which is Angela's Ashes. Okay.
Yeah.
Until then, you guys remember to dream.
Remember to try.
And if you're going to dream about the 1940s and try to solve what your identity is, then you should
do better than this episode.
Do good.
Do good, later, y'all.
Bros.
Later, bros. This episode of Brum Meets World was produced by Ceej and edited by Tony Curtis. Brum Meets World is a 2 Free Tokens media production.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
When the spawn meets world.
Join Jackie and Danielle, 2 best friends and ex-Blockbuster employees who are rewatching some of their favorite movies from the late 90s and early 2000s on the No More Late Fees podcast. And remember, be kind and rewind.